Southeast Asia contains both magnificent scenery and many places of historic interest. Laos, Vietnam and Cambodia. These three countries form the geographical and cultural region of Indochina. The term Indochina was used for the first time at the beginning of the 19th century by geographer Conrad Maltebrun. In creating this word, he wished to highlight the influence of China and India on this part of Southeast Asia. Due to its magnificent natural landscapes and variety of historic sanctuaries, Vietnam is one of the most interesting countries in Asia. In contrast to its neighbouring countries of Laos and Cambodia, the history of settlement in Vietnam dates back to the early Stone Age, around 30,000 years BC. It was only after it had been conquered by the Chinese that it was mentioned in historic documents. Despite its 3 million inhabitants, the capital city of Hanoi has a relatively calm, old-fashioned and provincial atmosphere. The city has numerous picturesque parks as well as a long history. Indeed, Hanoi is the oldest capital city in Southeast Asia. In 1010 AD, Li Taito, founder of the former Li Dynasty, had this residence built on the western banks of the Red River. He modeled it on the Chinese emperor's city. To emphasize the importance of his ambitious dynasty, he named his new capital city Thang Long, the Rising Dragon. Water puppet theatre is unique to Vietnam. Its origins date back to the 11th century. For more than 1,000 years, the influence of the mighty Chinese Empire dominated the history of Vietnam. China's cultural influence on Vietnam lasted for many years. In addition to Confucianism and Buddhism, Taoism is also an important religious and philosophic doctrine for the inhabitants of Hanoi. The Red River, or Song Hong, is an important traffic route in Vietnam. It flows into the South China Sea. South of Hanoi, in the Gulf of Tongking, the delta region of the Song Hong extends into one of the most beautiful natural miracles in the world, Ha Long Bay. Both small traditional fishing boats and pleasure boats move between the 1,600 islands of this remarkable bay. The rocky sandstone and limestone islands come in all shapes and sizes that appeal to the creative imagination of the local people. So there are numerous myths and legends that focus on the origins of Ha Long Bay. Beyond this fortified complex is the former royal Vietnamese city of Hue. There was good reason for its heavy defense. For centuries, the rulers here had exploited the farmers. Thus, in 1771, there was a revolt, the Tay Son insurrection. For years, South Vietnam was devastated by a bloody civil war. Eventually, the Nguyen monarchy was defeated. One grandson of the first Nguyen king managed to escape to Siam. The rest of his family was slaughtered. But the reign of the new king, Quang Trung, lasted only 3 years. His sudden death brought riots and savage struggles for power. After his return from exile in Siam, Nguyen An laid the foundations of today's Hue. In the years that followed, Nguyen An's residence developed quickly and soon became the magnificent center of Vietnam's last dynasty. The resurgence of the monarchy brought with it the problems of bygone times. In the 4th and 5th centuries, the picturesque Hoi An on the northern banks of the Tu Bon River was an important harbour town. The kingdom of Champa was once of great significance as a trading centre in Southeast Asia. Until the 14th century, the Hindu people of the Khmu Tribe ruled over large parts of central Vietnam. With the decline of the Cham, Hoi An began to lose its importance. This changed in the 17th century when, under the rule of the Nguyen dynasty, the harbour opened for international trade. For China and Japan, that each isolated themselves externally at the end of the 16th century, Hoi An played an important role. Here, as in many other foreign harbour towns, both countries were able to trade their goods and to nurture relations with other trading nations. The international harbour brought its inhabitants great wealth, such as that of Pang Hong, whose property is one of the most impressive privately owned buildings in Hoi An. The end of the 19th century marked the end of the city's economic zenith, as large ships were unable to anchor in the relatively small harbour. Despite the many power struggles that have taken place in Vietnam throughout its history, several buildings that date back to the Cham era have managed to survive, such as the striking Po Klong Garai Temple. This hill sanctuary was built at the end of the 11th century. Without doubt, it's one of the most beautiful examples of Cham architecture. The influence of India and Hinduism is not only reflected in the architecture of this fascinating people, but also in their strict social hierarchy. Although the caste system has not taken hold in Vietnam as it has in India. As in many other cities, including Saigon, now known as Ho Chi Minh City, the day begins with early morning Tai Chi. With more than 6 million inhabitants, the former Saigon is the most populous city in Vietnam. Its streets pulsate with life. But despite its modern character, this metropolis of the south has much respect for its many cultural treasures. Vietnam is also known for its extraordinary diversity of religions and religious tolerance. In addition to religion, important to the everyday life of the people is the colourful and exotic market, a real feast of the senses. Over the years, Malayan, Chinese and Indian traders have settled in Saigon, each with their own religious belief. Thus, the Srei Mariamman temple is still worshipped by Hindus that are one of Saigon's minority groups. Chinese influence is also reflected in the city's religious buildings, although religions here live very close together. Traditional folk dance is still extremely popular in Vietnam. Each ethnic group has its own unique dances. The graceful movements of the pretty female dancers in their magnificent dresses were still very popular with the Vietnamese monarchy. During the time of the monarchy, dance performances were only performed for the elite classes. The rural inhabitants of the large Mekong Delta in the southwest of the country were very poor and more concerned about their daily survival than regal dancers. Despite the dense vegetation and fertile soil that yield rich harvests, the farmers here always struggled for survival while the ruling families lived a life of luxury. Social injustice lasted for many years, as can still be seen when traveling through the Mekong Delta. The Mekong River Delta covers an area of almost 40,000 square kilometers. It's the third largest delta in the world. The hot and humid climate is typical of the entire region of Southeast Asia. Short and surprisingly strong tropical thunderstorms are common in these regions. But the rain brings short respite. Soon the scorching sun shines once again onto the numerous waterways of the delta. Up until the middle of the 20th century, large sections of the delta were covered by dense forests. The waterways that are so busy today were once empty and silent. Now, more and more land is being used for agriculture. Most of the islands of the Mekong Delta have fertile soil. Thus, the markets in this region are full of fresh fruit and vegetables. The floating market of Phang Hiep is no exception. Because of its convenient location with regard to transport facilities, the market has developed into the largest trading centre in the region. Farmers, fishermen and workers offer their goods for sale at the delta's floating markets. This market was once only used by the local people, but today has developed into a very popular tourist attraction. This wonderful floating market not only highlights the traditional lifestyle of the local people, it also tempts the appetite with its exotic array of produce. Along the endless channels and waterways are picturesque villages, the inhabitants of which are mainly farmers. Here there is a harvest 3 times a year. Around 2/3 of the food for Vietnam comes from the Mekong Delta. A fascinating cultural landscape that was once part of the legendary Funan realm. The Mekong Delta was first inhabited in relatively recent times. At the beginning of the 19th century, the Vietnamese, under the leadership of Nguyen, began to take control of this region. Up until the 7th century, this area was part of the Funan kingdom that was influenced by India before the Khmer expanded their area of influence to this part of the country. After the downfall of the Ming Dynasty in China in the middle of the 17th century, an increasing number of Chinese refugees came into this region and founded numerous towns. The foundation of Can Tho dates back to the first Chinese refugees. Today, this town, with its population of 250,000, is the largest in the Delta. But the special strategic location of Can Tho also had its disadvantages. During the Vietnam War, the harbor was used by the gunboats of the American military, and the war left its traces here. In contrast to Laos and Vietnam, nearby Cambodia is ethnically homogeneous. Around 90% of its people are Khmer. Economically, Cambodia is a third world country, but its many cultural treasures indicate its rich history. Cambodia's rise to power in Southeast Asia began in 802 AD, when Jayavarman II pronounced himself to be king. The Khmer realm of Angkor was born. The kings were worshipped like gods, and countless public temple complexes demonstrated the power of the kings. Indian influence was omnipresent. The former kings of Angkor were regarded as incarnations of the Hindu deities Shiva and Vishnu, and were worshipped accordingly. Society has changed much since those times. Yet in Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, old traditions and festivals are held in high esteem, such as the Water Festival of Changing Currents. The Tonle Sap is the location of a popular boat race. The 25-meter-long boats are powered by up to 40 oarsmen. The culture of the mighty godlike Khmer kings was of great significance for the development of the sacred architecture of Cambodia. The monarchy wanted to emphasize its glory even after death, and therefore ordered the erection of numerous magnificent temple complexes. The hectic pace of everyday life can always be seen in the markets of Phnom Penh. Around 2 million people take part in the daily chaos on the city's streets. The city's many wonderful temple complexes, such as Wat Phnom, are also affected by chaotic traffic problems. The historic buildings of earlier generations bring new hope to Cambodia's population. Now the country's doors are wide open to the tourist industry. However, the reason for Cambodia's poor economy was not entirely due to the monarchy, but to the communist reign of terror. Under the rule of the Khmer Rouge, a former school was transformed into a prison and much feared torture chamber. The Tuol Sleng Museum is a reminder of the despicable deeds of the Khmer Rouge, who tortured and killed thousands of prisoners here. Next, the contrast between brutality and gentleness is demonstrated very clearly by a visit to a Buddhist monastery. Although the Khmer Rouge destroyed many temples during their 4-year regime, a number of religious complexes miraculously managed to survive. Pol Pot, the ruthless leader of the communist Khmer Rouge guerrillas, banned all cultural and religious activities. Fortunately, this tragic chapter has now been relegated to the history books. Cambodia is now free to enjoy its cultural heritage. In the village of Udong, there is nothing to indicate that in former times, and for almost 250 years, it was the center of power of the Angkor Dynasty. In the 15th century, the realm suffered a serious political defeat. In 1431, it became subjected to the much-hated Thai. In subsequent centuries, Angkor's power gradually diminished. The Khmer suffered many setbacks, such as the loss of the Mekong Delta to Vietnam, as well as the loss of its western provinces to Siam. The transfer of the royal residence to Udong on the Tonle Sap River failed to bring the hoped-for advantages of being part of the Angkor realm. Indeed, in 1863, King Norodom I was forced to sign a treaty with France. Without this treaty and assistance from the French, Cambodia would have been helpless against its hostile neighbors of Vietnam and Siam. In 1866, the country's capital city was transferred from Udong to Phnom Penh, and Cambodia became part of the colonial realm of French Indochina. The Tonle Sap River is still an important lifeline. A boat trip from Phnom Penh to Siem Reap is an absolute must. The melting snow in the mountains of Tibet causes the rise of the water level of the Mekong. Normally, the result of this would cause heavy flooding, but the Tonle Sap helps to avoid this. The river takes the water masses of the Mekong and directs them into a large lake, a huge, shallow basin filled with fertile mud. This town of 60,000 inhabitants is mainly known as the starting point for trips to the legendary temples of Angkor. But Siem Reap also has its own places of interest. Wide avenues with dense traffic dominate the appearance of this boomtown. Bicycles are the main means of transport. The old and honourable Grand Hotel d'Angkor is reminiscent of Cambodia's colonial time and shines out in all its glory. For decades, the magnificent Grand Hotel was in poor repair until a number of foreign investors re-injected it with newfound splendour. In the sacred architecture of Cambodia, for the Khmer, Hindu cosmology has played an important role. The temple complex of Ta Prohm, that has been encroached by huge Bengal figs as well as banyan and kapok trees, also highlights these influences. The ruins and demolished temple buildings amid the jungle create a mysterious yet captivating atmosphere. Splendid reliefs on the walls of the central sanctuary feature images of gods as well as of Apsara dances. During the Angkor epoch, they were regarded as divine messengers. Even now, the traditional Apsara dances play an important role in the culture of the Khmer. They are Cambodia's most popular classical dances. The Apsara dance tells of the history of Cambodia's creation, in which the nymph Mira wooed the holy hermit Kampu. In former times, these dances were not performed for the common people. Only the king and his family were allowed to see them performed. Luckily, the Apsara dances have survived, and now everyone can enjoy them. The luxurious lifestyle of the godlike regents of Angkor is featured in Angkor Thom, a fantastic royal city that was built in 1200 AD by order of Jayavarman VII. Angkor was the last great capital of the Khmer and is the most well-preserved example of Ankorian city architecture. Unlike his predecessors, Jayavarman VII didn't believe in Hinduism, but was a follower of Mahayana Buddhism. However, he still clung to the idea of being a god king. The buildings of Angkor Thom demonstrate a cosmological as well as a symbolic world. The recapture of numerous regions under the rule of Jayavarman VII and the victory over the Cham people brought a new high season for the Khmer. The new capital of Angkor Thom was a clear sign of new gained strength. The sanctuary of Banteay Srei, around 20 kilometers northeast of the Khmer metropolis, is an exception to the traditional temple architecture of Angkor. The Women's Citadel was the only temple that wasn't built by royal command. The Brahmin scholar Vajnavaraya was responsible for its construction. In the 10th century, Vajnavaraya had an important function as a spiritual teacher and close confidant of the Khmer monarchy. For centuries, this architectural gem lay hidden within the jungle, until in 1914, a French lieutenant stumbled across it. The temple architecture of Banteay Srei differs in its filigree design from other of Angkor's famous sanctuaries. But the most famous Khmer sanctuary is Angkor Wat, 1,000 meters long, 800 meters wide. It's the largest sacred building in the world. With Angkor Wat, Khmer architecture was at its zenith. The 1,700 divine dances on the wall reliefs create a truly heavenly atmosphere. Alas, the original wooden buildings have perished. Only the stone buildings have survived. They're an impressive example of the highly developed architectural knowledge of the Khmer. The fate of many other temples that were destroyed by the ravages of man and time did not befall Angkor Wat. With its transformation into a Buddhist temple, the Hindu sanctuary of Angkor Wat survived the transformation of the state religion. So it has retained its old, majestic splendor. In Laos, that unlike Cambodia has no access to the sea, time seems to have stood still. The country and its inhabitants have their own slow pace of life, something that is now almost unique on this planet. Even Vientiane, the capital of Laos, with nearly 250,000 inhabitants, is one of the smallest metropolises in Southeast Asia. Life on the streets and the city's many traditional markets is conducted in a leisurely way. Since the reopening of what was formerly a completely closed communist country, Laos is now at the crossroads between the old and the new. Here, it is not only Buddhism that influences religious life. Invisible powers such as gods and evil spirits also influence the destiny of the people of Laos. In the religious thinking of the Laotian people, there are hundreds of spirits. And animism, the belief that all of nature is alive and full of spirits, is also common. In every creature, no matter whether human or animal, plant or inanimate object, everything is deemed to be full of supernatural powers, both good and bad. On the streets, nothing of these spirits is to be seen. However, Vientiane's colourful and varied architecture is a striking sight. The city has witnessed many struggles for power. Its valuable treasures have been pillaged and its religious sanctuaries destroyed. But some of the buildings have since been fully restored. The Laotian people are proud of their classical culture that originated from religious works of art and that features both Thai and Cambodian influences. This classical music was once only played during special occasions, such as royal ceremonies. The common people preferred a more dynamic style of music, an emotive music full of compassion. And the same is true today. In the center of Vientiane is the Anusavari Monument. It was erected before communist rule and commemorates the deceased of past wars. In the early 20th century, there was much resistance against French colonial rule. Laos gained its independence much later. The First Indo-Chinese War in 1954 brought longed-for independence. However, it did not bring much hoped-for wealth. In 1975, a bloodless revolution created the foundation of the communist-influenced Democratic People's Republic of Laos that still exists today. In the middle of the 1960s, a change of policy gave it renewed life. However, in the rural areas, the change of political direction to a market economy is hardly recognizable. 80% of Laos's 5 million inhabitants live in the countryside. With picturesque karst-covered mountains as a backdrop, the small town of Vang Vieng enjoys a beautiful location and has developed into a popular tourist destination, especially with backpackers from all over the world who are in search of adventure. But the beautiful scenery cannot fully obscure the bloody wars that once took place in this region. The present capital of this region, Ponsavang, originated in the middle of the 1970s. Its predecessor was completely destroyed during the Vietnam War. The entire area was totally destroyed by American bombers, as there was an important communist supply route in the area. For decades, some of the region's most important archaeological sites were heavily mined and so were closed to the public. The mines and bombs in the Plain of Jars were only moved in the 1990s. Today, it's possible to see the mysterious jars at close quarters. Hundreds of jars lay scattered within a 25-hectare area. Their origin is still unknown. With an average of 21 inhabitants per square kilometre, Laos has the lightest density of population in Southeast Asia. And much of the nature here is completely unspoiled. In addition to large families, village communities are the most important social units of Laos society. There's a strong sense of unity among the villages. The country's past politics have not interfered with that. For some years, the towns have provided relatively well-paid jobs, as well as many forms of entertainment. Thus, a growing number of young people move from the rural areas into the towns and cities. The surroundings of Vang Vieng feature several scenic attractions, such as the idyllic Quangji waterfalls. The waterfalls and the rock pools are like something from a tropical paradise. The various shallow water basins provide welcome refreshment from the humid heat. Many walkers take advantage of the cooling water. Many sightseers come to visit Luang Prabang, former royal residence of the Laos monarchy. In 1353, Luang Prabang became the capital of the first great realm of Laos. Over time, more and more monasteries were built here. Today, there are 35 monasteries that accommodate around 700 monks and 1,000 novices that play an important role in the daily religious life of this once important royal city. With the foundation of the great realm of Lanzang, land of 1,000,000 elephants, the political as well as the territorial influence of Laos monarchy spread far and wide. However, as in the middle of the 16th century, invasion by the Burmese military became more serious, and so the royal residence of Luang Prabang was abandoned. Although due to urgent military and strategic considerations, the town lost its position as the king's residence, it still had much significance as the religious center of Lanzang. For many years, the temple complex of Wat May contained the country's national sanctuary, the precious Buddha statue of Prabang. Today, this Buddha statue is only to be seen in Luang Prabang during the Buddhist New Year festival. A boat trip on the Mekong provides a fascinating impression of the untouched landscapes of the riverbanks. The limestone cliffs on the banks tower up into the sky and can be seen from quite a distance. The holy cave Tam Ting near Pakao emphasizes the deep religious belief of the people of Laos. Thousands of Buddha statues of all sizes have been erected here in recent years. Tam Ting has always been a place of worship, including in pre-Buddhist times. In those days, the river spirits of the Mekong were worshipped here. A visit to the rural areas is like traveling back in time. The people here are a mixture of many ethnic minorities whose ancestors came here at various times. The northern regions are still inhabited by dozens of primitive tribes who suffer discrimination from the inhabitants of the plains. The indigenous Hmong tribe is still persecuted. Armed hostilities during the Vietnam War, in which the Hmong fought against the communists, politically isolated this tribe. Although many of the Hmong escaped to Thailand at the end of the war, about 250,000 of them remained and even now have not been forgiven. The calm and peaceful village of Pak Beng on the river junction of the Mekong and Nam Beng suddenly springs to life in the evening with the arrival of pleasure boats. An increasing number of foreign backpackers stop here on their journey through the remote mountain areas. The village provides modest but much appreciated accommodation. The Khmu Tribe is also one of Laos's primitive peoples. They're the largest subgroup of the Lao Theung tribes. They earn their living mainly in agriculture by the planting of rice and coffee, as well as through animal breeding and hunting. The life of the villagers is dominated by strong family bonds. Parents, grandparents, and children live together under one roof. Everything here is shared. Officially, there are 68 ethnic groups in Laos that differ socially, culturally, and in religious belief. In Vientiane, the Laos government has divided the tribes into 3 main groups according to their ethnic and social backgrounds and at different geographical levels. So to simplify matters, the settlements have been divided into lowland, highland, and mountain areas. Attempts by the Laotian government to resettle the mountain people in the plains failed due to disapproval by the various tribes. Belief in spirits and ghosts among the traditional indigenous mountain tribes is widespread. The Angkor tribe have ghost gates in their villages to fend off evil spirits. On the edge of the Golden Triangle, Muang Sing was once an important trading center for opium that was sold legally in the markets up until 1975. Today, it's become a popular destination for backpackers. The town's many new buildings demonstrate its recent prosperity. However, the historic part of the town appears to have been forgotten by the town planners. The temples of Muang Sing are quite modest buildings. Buddhist monasteries not only served as centers of religion and culture, but in the rural areas they also played an important role in education. Most of Laos' 20,000 Buddhist monks and novices are quite young, between 10 and 25 years of age. Since French colonial times, much has changed in Southeast Asia, but the name Indochina has remained right up to the present day. Laos, Vietnam and Cambodia, three neighbouring countries that form one of the most fascinating cultural areas in the world. Exotic gems with a dramatic history.